Why? What do you want to do?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لإيلاف قريش إيلافهم رحلة الشتاء والصيف فليعبدوا رب هذا البيت الذي أطعمهم من جوع وآمنهم من خوف. صدق الله العظيم.
over time. If you go to the next slide, very quickly, 124 billion rupees worth of sales that we spoke about. 29 billion rupees is our parent company, International Industries, their turnover. We've done this year, as you've seen this morning, 69 billion, and Pakistan Cables have done 26 billion rupees. So that together accounts for 124 billion in a group turnover. Going on to our vision, our vision remains that we would be the premium manufacturer of flat steel products in Pakistan. That remains the case, and as you have seen over the years, we are um, by far the market leader in flat steel products in Pakistan. Our mission remains to establish our presence in industry by providing superior quality and reliable services, catering to our customer needs at competitive prices. Nick? Our corporate philosophy is adopting world-class technologies, enhancing manufacturing capabilities, and contributing to society by providing excellent products and services. And what you see here, Zuhaib, if you can go back to the slide for a minute. So this is our premium manufacturing facility at Landi. So what you see here is the cold rolling complex, our galvanizing steel complex, and our color coating line all located here, as well as our 18 megawatt power plant is also located at the same premises. Our second premises is located at Port Qasim, Bin Qasim Industrial Park, where we produce, if you go back to the previous slide, not just here as yet, the second, please go forward a little bit. Our second facility does, yeah, you just hold it here, please. And our second facility here, which is not here, does the service part of our business, which is slitting, profiling, and cutting coils down to their lengths. So that's our second facility, which you can't see here, but that's at Bin Qasim Industrial Park. Go forward, the next slide. Our core values remain integrity, diversity, respect for people, fairness, and responsibility. And if you go to our next slide, our health and safety. Health and safety is one area that we put in a lot of emphasis. We aspire to be a responsible manufacturer and a good corporate citizen. So we've done this year 1.3 million safe man hours, 1,915 hours we've spent on training people on health and safety issues. We've unfortunately had one lost time incident during the year. As a result, our total recordable incident rate has been 0.56 for this year. The next is the highlight of the year for us, July to September. We have had a number of awards and recognitions that you see here. And the same has continued for the second half of the year as well. The two highlights I'd like to share where Samir and I received with our Japanese partners an award for completing 3 million tons of raw material that we have purchased from Japan. If you go forward to the next slide, please. Again, this year, like for the last consecutive 5 years, we have received the Management Association of Pakistan Award for in the manufacturing segment. I think this has been 5 straight years that we have been declared winner of the category, which primarily includes the manufacturing sector, and it looks for the better manufacturing and management practices. If you go forward, we have a network that spans across the country. We have a presence in Islamabad, where our regional office for is based in Lahore, Multan, and Karachi, where our head office, factory, and our steel service center are located. Across on the other side is an ever-growing footprint of our exports. It goes across and cuts across many.
We missed a slide before. Yes.
So again, on a value creation bit, we've made we've contributed to the government in about 126 billion rupees in duties and taxes. We've done exports of about $555 million so far. We've been a top exporter for many years now. Obviously, we've had a huge focus on developing learning and skill development. So we spent about 40-odd thousand hours on training. Obviously, this year we received an Employer of the Choice Award in Diamond category. And our CSR contribution, which primarily focuses on health and education, is about 1.5% of our profit after tax. And this year we've contributed a fairly significant amount to health and education across various sectors in the country. If you go on to the next slide, which we were looking at just now, it's an ever-growing footprint. Two of the larger markets for us are now US and Canada. And then nearer home, we sell into the Middle East, South Asia, into Afghanistan, and then further apart into Australia. So those are our big markets. Obviously, to sell into these markets, we need to have global and international certification. So, for example, to sell into the European Union, we need to be REACH and ROS compliant. So we've now been certified by all these agencies. Very recently, we've now been certified for Saudi Arabia because a lot of development is happening into Saudi Arabia, and one qualification factor to be able to sell into Saudi Arabia is the CESO certification, which we've received, and we're now focusing extensively to sell into the Saudi market. The products and services that we sell, we have three major products: cold rolled, galvanized, and pellet steel. And our biggest single segment is cold rolled, followed by galvanized and pellet coated steel. So those are our three large segments. We'll come to their applications in the next slides. So in the cold roll segment, we serve several sectors, primarily around automotives, electrical, switchgear, domestic appliances. In the last couple of years, we've developed a tin mill blackplate TMBP solution, which we're selling into this market. Plus, it is also the base metal for galvanizing steel products. To enhance our footprint, we have worked quite extensively on developing new products and new portfolios. One of them we've just spoken about, which is tin mill plate. So these are some very specialized grades, what we call in T2, T3, and T4, the tempered grades. And we have successfully produced and started selling them in sizable quantities. Another two products that we are in the process of now basically offering and selling are non-grain oriented electrical steel. Now, this finds a lot of application in steel segments, in electrical steel segments, in fans, electrical motors, appliances, and we expect that this product would be a pretty strong driver for cold rolled growth in the coming years. Another product we've developed is high tensile steel, which is for the four-wheelers. And as the four-wheeler segment gets back on and up and running, I think we expect significant growth from this sector as well. And finally, a very important development, very specialized. If you can go back, not just, yeah. If you go back to the slide, please keep it here. Weather-resistant steel. This is the latest product that we have developed, and we are now aggressively marketing it to a few segments where we think there will be significant growth in the coming years in these four things. So we are obviously quite excited in developing these four new products. All the research work, development work has been done by our team here, who've done the research and the development part and how to produce it to a globally accepted standard. So again, a lot of hard work has gone into developing these new grades and new products. So Zaid, if you go forward to the next slide where we talk about the galvanizing segment. So it goes into major segments like construction, heating, ventilating, and air conditioning application, razor wires, domestic appliances, obviously agricultural implements, light gauge steel structures, air handling units, and so on and so forth. Again, a very important large sector, which is a growing sector for us. Finally is our color-coated steel segment of our product, which again goes into very similar applications as colored. Obviously, one significant advantage of color-coated steel is that it provides an additional layer of protection to the product. Plus, it can be, it can be produced to the colors and designs that one would want to see. And we have a possibility to choose from an endless array of colors and combinations in these applications. Again, widespread applications include industrial facades and buildings, electrical appliances, domestic use in trunks and boxes, agricultural uses, and some outdoor applications. So taking our product portfolio further, the services segment. And in the services segment, as we've just spoken about, all our services are done at our steel service center at Bin Qasim Industrial Park. And we have the ability to do all various kinds of value addition processes there, including slitting, cut to length, C and Z section purlins, which go into construction solutions. Similarly, C channels for light gauge steel structures. We do profile in various, as you see here on your bottom right, various types of profiles that we can do. And similarly, we do purlins for construction purposes as well. So to enhance these applications, we have developed we have started a digitization initiative. And you can see here that this is an application that is widely now available to all our customers who can place orders, check the status of their orders, check the status of their ledgers, and ensure that their orders are ready to be delivered. So again, a very smart solution that provides a customer direct interface with the company, with the status of the order, so they can organize their production as well as the logistics accordingly. So this has been about the company, our group, and what we have done so far. We now move on to the next part of our presentation, which essentially talks about the year that has gone by. This year that has gone by has been marred, as we discussed in the AGM this morning, by a number of things. The utility costs, primarily gas costs, have spiraled. So we've seen over 170% increase in the gas prices. For those of you who have looked at our gross margins more carefully, compared to previous years, the gas and the utility cost increase has taken almost 1% off our gross margins on account of the increase that's come about. So from roughly 1,200 meters MMBTU, the prices have increased as a mix of both LNG and RLNG to 33,250 rupees per MMBTU. So very significant increase on the gas prices. We've seen for most of the year, um, contraction in the large steel manufacturing, in the large scale manufacturing, and barely we grew by about 0.07% by the end of the year. One major factor that the industry, not just us, but the long steel product manufacturers, which include bars and billets manufacturers, have seen, and many other industries, including edible oil, including tea, have seen is the sales tax and advanced income tax exemption given to erstwhile FATA and PATA areas. Now, obviously, government had a plan of withdrawing this exemption year before last. They did not. And this year also, after announcing that they would withdraw, they have taken that announcement back and have extended it for another year. So with the passage of time, the misuse has increased. And this year, we've seen this misuse go up onto its peak. I don't think we've seen this peak go up to as high as it has just been this year. We have operated pretty much the whole year at 22% policy rate, which, if you include the impact of KIBOR, would go up by another 1.5%. So at about 23.5%. So that has impacted the industry in general, and we have seen a slowdown across many sectors of the industry as a consequence. Inflation has been high for most of the year, which has prevented the state bank to reduce the policy rate. And it's only now that they've started reducing, and we expect the policy rate would continue to see a downward trend as we go along. One major issue has been the price volatility of our raw material. The raw material volatility has been largely driven by the slow growth in China. China is by far the largest steel producer in the world. So of the 1.2 million tons of steel that's produced, China does 1.8 billion. China does 1.2 billion tons of steel. And with their slowdown, the prices have seen a general tumble across the world. And we expect that this trend would continue in at least foreseeable future in the next at least 3 to 6 months. This is then backed up with subdued global demand and the volatility, and we've seen now increasingly more protectionist measures taken in by the US, North American markets, Canada, and also in the European Union. So clearly a very mixed business environment that we sort of faced or encountered this year. In spite of this, if we go on to the summary for the year, our revenue was about 9% lower than last year. So from 76 odd percent last year, we had a total revenue of 69 billion rupees. However, our sales volume was just about the same as compared to last year. And we have seen the profit after tax is marginally higher than last year. I think last year we ended at around 3.5 billion, and we are about 3.7 billion. So marginally higher than last year. Export sales were about 16.7 billion rupees. And we have seen a very significant reduction in our financial charges, which we'll talk about in the next few slides. One very significant part for us has been the cash flow from our operations, which was extremely healthy at 4.9 billion. At 4.9 billion, it meant that it paid for all the capital expenditure plus working capital requirements of the company. And as a result, and you will see in the cash flow statement in a bit, that we ended the year with a very healthy cash position of almost 2.7 billion rupees in hand. Earnings per share against 8 rupees of last year, we ended at 8.4. And the gross margin that we just spoke about was lower than last year at 12.4%, primarily driven by the last quarter's price adjustments and a very significant increase in costs on account of higher inflation as well as increase in the utility prices. So based on these based on the factors that I've just discussed and the fact that we have been impacted by inflation and a very significant increase in utility costs, we've taken a number of initiatives to try and reduce our costs now and then going forwards. So a considerable amount of effort has gone into lean manufacturing and Six Sigma, which basically uses data analysis um, and um, um, and problem-solving techniques to come to unique solutions to solve a particular problem. So a lot of effort has gone into increasing the production efficiency and minimizing waste. As part of our sustainability initiatives and to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, we announced a project to do a 6.4 megawatt solar power plant at our factory in Landi. I think by sometime in November this year, we should be able to get it up and running. A lot of effort that we have put in this year, as you would see, is on managing and ensuring the working capital management, which is about ensuring that we understand the customer demand right down to an SKU level, and then to be able to plan accordingly from a raw material standpoint in an environment which is high interest rate and in an environment where in a lot of sectors have shrunk considerably. It becomes absolutely critical for us to be able to plan our inventory correctly and therefore be able to reduce the working capital requirement for the company. And I'm very pleased in suggesting that we had launched a project with a company that manufactures aircrafts, Dassault, and this supply chain system is now up and running. So we are now able to forecast right down to an individual SKU level, and then to be able to buy inventory based on what we would require, which has significantly reduced the company's working capital needs and requirements. Another very critical one that we have successfully done is to reduce waste and waste minimization and the strategies to reduce it. They've been quite we've been quite successful in reducing it, and that is going to cause and support our strategy of saving costs on account of reduced wastage. Another very important and critical process factor that we started from our sustainability perspective is to be able to rain harvest and collect water, whatever comes down during the monsoon season, and then to be able to recharge the aquifer so that we maintain the underground water levels at a respectable level, as well as to also improve the quality of underground water. So that's an initiative that's been ongoing for the last couple of years, and we are now beginning to see some positive contribution from these initiatives. The second one that we just discussed was the advanced supply chain solution. The advanced supply chain solution is about enhancing the visibility across or throughout the supply chain, improve demand forecasting and planning, as we just discussed, improving efficiency, reduce the delivery lead time, and basically ensure that we are able to deliver high service levels to our customers. So again, a very critical part of our strategy going forwards. We are already beginning to see some of the benefits now flowing into the company, and we expect that it would do um, a tremendous support as far as the working capital needs are concerned going forwards. The solar project we've just spoken about, we started this solar project with an investment of 1 billion rupees to do 6.5 megawatts. Now, obviously, this has been installed or is being installed on roofs. So therefore, it would require a significant structural reinforcement to support addition of additional additional structures. That work has been completed now. We expect that this project would close way lower than 1 billion that we have budgeted, and therefore it will reduce further the cost of electricity that we will generate. The part of this initiative, as we discussed, that we've seen the energy costs go up quite significantly. This will help us to reduce at least 30% of those costs um, um, going forwards. We now go on to the last part of our presentation, which is about the financial highlights. So the financial highlights, if we see a 3-year summary, post-COVID, we hit a peak of 91 billion on revenue. This was also on account of the steel prices when they reached an all-time high of nearly $1,000 a ton. And since then, we've seen a significant contraction in our economy. And as a result, this year, we've ended at 69 billion rupees, of which, as we've just discussed, 16.7 billion was in exports and 52 billion was in domestic sales. In terms of sales volume, we've done about 272,000 tons this year compared to previous year. And if we go into our profit after tax, as I had said earlier, against 3.5 billion, we've done 3.6 billion rupees this year. And our dividend yield has been around 7% this year. So I think when we see the results, one very important aspect is the ability of the company to deleverage itself. So if you see our total debt, it stood at 21.5 billion at the end of fiscal year 2022. And in the last 2 years, it's remained at virtually about the same levels at 4.7. So between these 2 years, you see a considerable value that's been unlocked, and we have managed to bring down both the short-term debt as well as the long-term debt. And most of the long-term debt we've paid now is at least has been 2 years in advance that we've paid the long-term debt. So today, all our debt, whether long-term or short-term, is concessionary. So the long-term debt is now composed of the TURF plus long LTFF, which is long-term finance facility, and very recently REFF, which is renewable energy finance facility at 6%. So our overall debt profile at 2.25% for TURF, LTFF as at 5.5%, and REF at 6% is significantly lower than the prevailing policy rate, as well as the Carbo Plus that's being offered. So here, I think I'd just like to highlight a lot of it has been achieved through operations excellence, and a considerable portion of it has been on account of working capital management, which has been primarily on account of selective markets that we've operated in, and better margins over the last few years. So we go on to change the balance sheet. The balance sheet is not too visible, but I just sort of try and read this out as much as I can. The balance sheet for the company is as strong as one could possibly imagine. The equity at the end of this year was at 23 billion rupees, of which the unappropriated profit or revenue reserve was at 16.7 billion rupees, compared to 15.1 billion rupees last year. More importantly, if you look at the inventory, if we look at our inventory stock and trade of 18.5 billion, against that, our short-term borrowing is only at 3.5 billion rupees, which means that the inventory that we carry for 20 billion has been has been paid for, and we have money well in excess. So clearly a very strong position, for the company here. The long-term borrowing, as you can see, is about 845 million rupees here, which is, as I said, is all concessional. There's no CIBOR-based borrowing here. And similarly, if we look at our numbers, we have a very strong cash balances at the end of the year at 2.7 billion rupees, which means that we have, in terms of ratios, a very strong current ratio of about 1.33 here. So again, from a balance sheet perspective, very strong position for the company. Similarly, if we go on to the next slide, which is about the P&L. So the P&L reflects, what I had just spoken about. So we've had, in terms of the energy cost, over in excess to what we had budgeted during the year. We had almost a 1 billion rupee increase in our energy costs this year. And I think if that had not been the case, then I think our gross margin would have been higher than the last year's margin. One important thing to notice here in our P&L is, compared to previous year, where we had financial charges of about 2.2 billion rupees. This year, our financial charges were about 850 million rupees, which is a very significant reduction, primarily on account of better inventory management and the working capital management that we spoke about. Going on to the cash flows. The cash flows tell us an equally strong story, which is our cash flow from operations was almost about 5 billion rupees. So this 5 billion rupees, if you take in both investing and financing activities, still gives you 1 billion rupees more than what we spent. So again, a very strong position in terms of cash for the company. So if I can now request, if we go to the next slide. So the next slide is we talk about the key challenges and the future outlook. One of the key challenges we face now is a continuous ongoing business challenge, which is volatility in steel pricing. As I just discussed, as the result of the slowdown in the Chinese economy, and there's a lack of stimulus so far offered by the government, we have seen a very steady decline in Chinese steel prices, which has created an impact all across the world. So we have also felt the same thing. The prices, which had peaked at around in this round about $800 per ton, have now come down to just under $500 per ton. So there's a significant reduction. What has helped us? What has helped us is the fact that we have optimized our inventory levels to a lower level, which means that we don't carry too much of an expensive inventory with us. So the impact would be that much lower for us than if we had carried a much higher valued inventory. Domestic demand has been subdued, especially in certain sectors. We have yet to see a strong recovery, so we still feel that those sectors are somewhat depressed. Uh, One major issue the industry faces today is, as I had spoken about at the AGM and earlier today, is the sales tax exemption of in the FATA and PATA areas. Now, the sales tax exemption, for us to understand, is that we as a manufacturer pay sales tax at the input stage and claim an adjustment at the output stage. So if you give an exemption and if that is misused and sold in the market here, then there is no, and if we try to match it, then there is no way that you can take that significant an impact on your cost, because then that 45 or 50,000 rupees would become part of our cost, which you can't adjust. Now, obviously, your margins are not as high enough to be able to get 50,000 rupees of tax on just one account. So we can't, um, we struggle with this exemption. However, one positive they've done is that they have asked the importers who import under the garb of FATA and PATA to basically submit a pay order to the amount of sales tax. Now, that has somewhat reduced the imports currently. Now, whether that continues to be a trend, one will have to see and see if it happens. There are certain sectors where there has been misdeclaration and people have tried to circumvent the duties that are in place. And as you may have seen a few weeks back, we had filed a case for circumvention of duties against galvanized steel products. The case, after 3 months, was accepted by the Tariff Commission. So once the Tariff Commission accepts a case, it means that there is enough merit for them to proceed further. So I expect that there would be an outcome in the coming, in the coming few weeks on this area. Another major area is, as we had operated in a higher inflation environment and higher energy costs, the input costs have continued to rise and grow. I mean, this year, government also increased duty on our raw material by 2%. So HRC, that was before June available at 5%, is now available at 7%. And similarly, since government infrastructure cess, which was previously charged at 1.25%, is now charged at 1.85%. So there is roughly an increase of 2.5% on the duty side for the inputs. So there is that impact of higher costs. However, on a more positive side, we do believe that we are now moving into a period of low inflation. And as the inflation lowers, and as we have seen, the oil prices have come down and have come down considerably, they will reduce the government's pressure on current account deficit. By some estimates, it may reduce the current account deficit by 3 to 3.5 billion rupees, by $3.5 billion. And if that happens, obviously, the inflation would stay at the lower levels, and therefore the interest rates, which have been coming down, we expect them to come down further, which will precipitate two things. A, the PKR stability, which actually works in our favor. And the second thing is that we would see a pickup in industrial activity around the country. So both are quite positive for us. We see the potential for exports because, as you might have seen, the US has now started anti-dumping measures against many countries, including Vietnam, including UAE, and some of the other significant producers. Pakistan is obviously not one of them. So there is an incentive for us to get into market where the exports from these traditional countries would reduce. So there is an opportunity for us in that direction. We'd continue to explore right areas to grow. So there are a number of areas, as you might have seen, the balance sheet is strong enough, capable enough with, and it's been deleveraged to an extent that we only carry concessional debt. Uh, it is absolutely in the right place to look for investment opportunities that we are actively at this stage looking at. And as we had spoken about in the morning and also just very early on in this presentation, that with the first project that we have won in Reko, which is about construction of an accommodation block, which is phase 1 of the project. And we're hoping and anticipating that as we go along, when the phase 2 comes along, with our experience in phase 1, we would or could potentially become the preferred option for the second phase as well. So there is a significant opportunity for us in terms of growth. And while we are there, it also opens up opportunity for selling further product into these markets. So it seems to so the future from a company's perspective, I would conclude by saying that within the steel sector, it is an outlier performance given the results of some of the companies that have come about so far in the sector. We clearly seem to have picked up the right chord by looking at the areas and the issues and the challenges rightly, and we were able to take corrective actions way in advance. That has enabled us to be, from a financial standpoint, in a fairly strong position and well poised to take growth opportunities when they arise. And similarly, it also enables us, as the interest rates come down, to look aggressively at some of the opportunities that exist in the market. So the final part of the presentation is the awards and the recognitions. We've had multiple of awards from various agencies. We won the Export Performance Award from FPCCI, from Karachi Chamber. We got, as I said, MAP Award of Excellence, which is by far the most prestigious award in Pakistan as far as management practices and performance is concerned. And we've now won it for 5 straight years. So again, great performance from us. Again, being recognized as the employer of choice for the last couple of years by Employers Federation of Pakistan. So that is all from my side, Dave. If we can sort of open for a Q&A session, then be great.
So first we'll start with the flow. Any person has a question?
There's a question here, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Nasheed Malik here from Topline Securities. My first question is that in your annual report, you have mentioned that you have a 21% market share of long steel segment or long steel market of the industry. So does this 21% include all the flat steel products, including galvanized and color coated and cold rolled coil? And what is the total size of the long steel market? And you have also mentioned in your report 42% export volumes growth. So can you please elaborate exact number? And obviously, my final question is that you have achieved phenomenal growth in terms of exports, especially I noticed, especially in Europe and in North America. Can you please elaborate on the reasons and how sustainable is this growth?
So I think a lot of questions, Rishi, in one group. So if I forget any of them, please remind me. So I go with the last one first. So we spoke about the exports. and the sustainability of export volumes. So in terms of volumes, we've done about 20,000 tons more than last year. So last year we just did under 47,000 or 48,000 tons. This year we've done in excess of 68,000 tons in export markets. Now the export markets, as I had briefly touched upon, is our product is liked and preferred in a number of markets because we get repeat orders for many years now. The only one issue around sustainability is actually there are two issues around sustainability. One sustainability factor which is becoming very important these days is the protectionism around the world, and more so in US than any other country around the world. Generally, what US does is what Canada and Europe follows. So in US, if you would remember when Donald Trump became president, he imposed duties for everybody around the world. And those duties have remained in force even now. And they had been imposed because he thought of steel as an industry that was strategic to the US. So they've remained in place. Now, the other thing they've done was to put anti-dumping duties on countries like China, India, South Korea, Brazil, and others. Now, Brazil, they later sort of reduced because of it being part of the America thing. The other part is the other part for the Chinese, where they had imposed duties in excess of 400%. So they've been pushed out, which has created a market for many other countries, including Pakistan. Now they are basically taking out a lot of other countries as well from this fold. So which would technically mean that for a period of time, we will have a clearer access to these markets. Now, having said that, generally what happens is that immediately as the anti-dumping investigation for countries begin in US, customers start backing off because they expect that by the time the material may arrive, government may impose preliminary duties on imports from these countries. And at that point, it would leave their imports uncompetitive. So you see a very immediate effect in them. Now, the question is that also is a signal for us to be very prudent in the way and how much and the way we export to these markets. And that is precisely what we'll do. We'll be very prudent in our exports. So from this particular angle, it seems that these exports would remain sustainable. The other issue that affects the sustainability is the steel pricing around the world. Now, the steel pricing is, as you know, currently for the last 5 months, we have seen the prices have maintained a downward spiral. The general tendency around the world is that if you import today and if it takes 3 months to come in, the likelihood the prices will be lower at what price you've bought are higher. So there is a certain amount of reluctance to import at this stage unless you can see stability creeping back into markets. So therefore, you would see a slight a slight reluctance on part of the buyers. Now, generally, this kind of uncertainty in the market does not prevail for long because markets like to be certain. So you then tend to see a shift back towards the equilibrium. So I think in a shorter run, these factors will play a part. But when you are in an export business, you look at the long haul. So I think in the long haul, they are much more sustainable than they are in the short run. Now, that was the last part of the 2 parts of your last question. You had 2 more questions. Okay. So that margin piece is very important. What we have seen over a period of time is as a result of FATA and PATA issues. We have seen a very significant increase in imports to FATA and PATA. This year, our estimates, and when I say our estimates, these are not our estimates. These were the estimates given to me by FBR. They, in their view, 250,000 tons of steel was cleared under FATA and PATA. Now, at that volume, this puts FATA and PATA steel consumption at 1,300 tons per capita, compared to our national average of 37 kilograms per capita. So there must be something very massive going on in FATA and PATA that we are not aware of. So, so therefore, that increase and that misuse has grown over time. And that has very negatively impacted us. Now, there are two very obvious options for us. Now, one way of combating it is by reducing your price by the same equivalent amount, but that makes no sense because you'd be adding up to your cost without actually gaining any advantage. So, so therefore, this volume as a result of imports under FATA and PATA and the misdeclaration part for which we filed the circumvention case, they together have taken a very significant portion of the market. Now, we expect that the actions that have been taken, which is asking for a pay order in terms of FATA and PATA, and you have seen some slowdown on that account. And then the circumvention case that we filed. So I think in the coming weeks, we would see these imports tapering off a bit. I think they have tapered off a little bit in the first few weeks, a few months of the financial year, 2.5 months. But we expect that this would be a bigger trend in the future. So our market share has historically centered around, has been around between 33 to 35, 37%. And I expect that that is where it would eventually return to. Now, having said that, our increased focus would remain on our ability to export to more markets. Because even after getting to that 30% or 35% market, given the current slowdown on our economy, it's actually very difficult to get to. So I think the market share would return back to where it was, where it has historically been, as soon as the issues around, FATA, PATA, and circumvention issues are addressed.
आप रॉ मटेरियल चाइना से मंगवाते हैं?
नहीं, हमारा रॉ मटेरियल जो है वो ज्यादातर जापान से आता है।
जापान से आता है, तो आप उसके अलावा आपका कंपटीटर कौन होगा जो एक्सपोर्ट में?
हमारा तो देखिए एक्सपोर्ट में पूरी दुनिया compete करती है। दुनिया में जो सबसे बड़ा एक्सपोर्टर है वो है चाइना, और सबसे बड़ा प्रोड्यूसर चाइना, और अभी भी दुनिया का सबसे बड़ा एक्सपोर्टर चाइना है। इस साल उन्होंने अभी तक कोई 72 मिलियन टन एक्सपोर्ट किया। मेरा ख्याल है जब तक ये साल खत्म होगा तो 90 मिलियन तक वो पहुंच चुके होंगे। तो चाइना है, उसके बाद इंडिया सेकंड लार्जेस्ट स्टील प्रोड्यूसर, 110 मिलियन टन बनाता है। जापान जो है वो कंसिस्टेंटली 40 मिलियन टन एक्सपोर्ट करता है। उसके बाद नंबर ऑफ कंट्रीज जिसमें टर्की है, तो टर्की इज अ वेरी लार्ज स्टील प्रोड्यूसर, और टर्की बहुत एक्सपोर्ट करता है। रशिया बहुत एक्सपोर्ट करता था, लेकिन जब से ये यूक्रेन वॉर के बाद रशिया पर सैंक्शंस लगी हैं तो रशियंस हैव बीन आउट ऑफ द मार्केट। इसके अलावा और बहुत से मुल्क हैं, ब्राज़ील है वो करता है एक्सपोर्ट, और फिर आपको ये इजिप्ट है, थोड़ा बहुत इजिप्ट ये करता है, फिर सऊदी अरेबिया ने एक्सपोर्ट करना शुरू कर दिया एक्सपोर्ट, और उसमें फिर हमारा नंबर भी है। इंक्रीजिंगली इट्स अ लार्ज नंबर। 70,000 टन अगर आप एक्सपोर्ट करते हैं तो स्टील में, विदाउट बीइंग अ लार्ज स्टील मैन्युफैक्चरिंग कंट्री, इट्स अ वेरी साइजेबल नंबर। تو یہ سب لوگ ملا کر دنیا بھر میں جو 1.8 بلین ٹن کی مارکیٹ بناتے ہیں، اس میں چائنا جو ہے وہ تقریباً 1.2 یعنی 12 لاکھ ٹن 1.2 بلین ٹنز بناتا ہے۔ 1.2 بلین ٹنز کا بنانے کا مطلب یہ ہے کہ جو ہماری 11 ملین ٹن کی نیشنل ڈیمانڈ ہے، جس میں سریا بھی شامل ہے اور ہماری فلیٹ سٹیل بھی شامل ہے، یہ سب مل کے ان کی 6 شفٹوں کی 2 مہینے کی پروڈکشن سمجھ لیجیے۔ 2 مہینے بھی کیا، میرے خیال میں 8 شفٹوں کی پروڈکشن ہوگی ٹوٹل۔
ہمارے جو یہ ملک کے حالات کی وجہ سے جیسے کہ بجلی گیس کا مسئلہ آتا ہے تو ہماری کاسٹ زیادہ نہیں پڑتی ہے ایکسپورٹ میں، ہم پیچھے نہیں رہ جاتے ہیں؟
دیکھیں جو ایکسپورٹ کمپیٹیٹیونیس ہے اس میں یہ ایک ایسپیکٹ ہے،
چائنا سب سے آگے ہے۔
یہ ایسپیکٹ ہے چائنا، کیونکہ ایک وہاں پر ان تمام چیزوں میں ان کی گورنمنٹ تو سبسڈی دیتی ہے، اور دوسرا یہ کہ چائنا میں انفراسٹرکچر بھی زیادہ ڈیولپڈ ہے۔ ہمارے پاس جو یوٹیلیٹی ہے بھی، وہ بھی اس کی بھی جو کوالٹی اور ریلائبلٹی پہ بہت زیادہ اچھی نہیں ہے۔ ہم نے تو جنریشن پہ زیادہ کام کیا، ٹرانسمیشن ڈسٹریبیوشن پہ کیا نہیں، تو ہمارے پاس جو بجلی کی کوالٹی ہے وہ بھی کوئی بہت اچھی نہیں ہے۔ چائنا کا انفراسٹرکچر اس سے زیادہ اچھا، ہم سے زیادہ اچھا ہے۔ پھر انہوں نے کوئی آئی پی پیز کی ڈیل نہیں کی، کچھ یہ نہیں کیا، تو ان کی بجلی کی کاسٹ کافی کم ہے۔ ہماری کاسٹ تو اس وقت جو ہے وہ، جیسے میں نے آپ سے عرض کیا کہ 1200 روپے ایم ایم بی ٹی یو سے بڑھ کے 3250 روپے ایک سال کے اندر ہوگی۔ تو اگر ایک سال کے اندر آپ کی کاسٹ پر آپ بلین روپے لوڈ کر دیں تو ایکسپورٹ کمپیٹیٹیونیس تو اس سے متاثر ہوتی ہے۔ لیکن ایکسپورٹ جب آپ دنیا میں کرنے جاتے ہیں تو یہ سارے ملک جن کا میں نے نام لیا، انڈیا، جاپان، چائنا، ان کی آپ سکیلز دیکھیں تو وہ پاکستان سے بہت زیادہ بڑے سکیلز،
لارج اسکیل پہ
تو لارج سکیل سے ویسے ہی ان کی کاسٹ آف پروڈکشن کم ہوتی ہے۔ ہماری تو ایک تو یہ کہ پروڈکشن اتنی نہیں ہے کیونکہ ڈیمانڈ اتنی نہیں ہے، اور اس کے بعد اگر آپ کاسٹ بڑھا دیں تو اور زیادہ آپ کو مشکل ہے کمپیٹ کرنے کا۔ دوسرا کام یہ کہ ہمارا یہ تو صرف ایک مسئلہ کاسٹ کا ہے، پھر ہماری جو جس طرح ہماری ٹیکسیشن ہے وہ یوں ہے کہ 90% ٹیکس آپ ٹیکس فائل کرنے سے پہلے ہی گورنمنٹ کو پے کر دیتے۔ مینوفیکچرنگ کمپنی کے لیے تو یہ آپ کا ورکنگ کیپٹل سے نکل، برڈن ورکنگ کیپٹل پر آتا ہے۔ تو اس لیے یہ تمام چیزیں جو ہیں، جیسے جیسے آپ کاسٹ بزنس پہ لگاتے جائیں گے تو وہ کاسٹ جو ہے وہ آپ کی کمپیٹیٹیونیس گلوبل سطح پر تو اس کو کم کرتی ہے۔ اور تو یہ ایک مسائل ہیں ہمارے پاس۔ ہم نے منیمم ویج ہر سال 20-25% بڑھاتے ہیں، قطع نظر اس کے کہ صحیح بڑھاتے ہیں یا غلط بڑھاتے ہیں، لیکن جب آپ 25% بڑھاتے ہیں تو آپ کو دنیا بھر میں تو 25% نہیں بڑھتی، تو آپ نے کمپیٹ جو کرنا ہے ان ملکوں میں جہاں انفلیشن نہیں ہوتی، 2-3% ہوتی ہے، وہاں تو 25% انہرڈ آف ہوتی ہے۔ میں اس پہ بحث نہیں کر رہا کہ یہ ٹھیک ہے یا غلط ہے، لیکن جو ایشو ہے وہ یہ ہے کہ کاسٹ تو بڑھ گئی۔
کاسٹ بڑھے گی تو آپ کمپٹیشن کیسے کر سکتے؟
تو کاسٹ بڑھے گی تو اس کا صرف ایک ہی طریقہ ہے جو میں نے آپ کو یہاں دکھایا۔ جب آپ کی کاسٹ بنتی ہے اور آپ کاسٹ کو اس بزنس میں پاس آن نہیں کر سکتے تو آپ کو فوکس کرنا پڑتا ہے اپنی پروڈکٹیوٹی پر۔ تو ہم نے پروڈکٹیوٹی کے لیے جو کام کر رہے ہیں وہ یہی کام کر رہے ہیں کہ اس کی ہم اپنی کاسٹ کو کم کر سکیں۔ اب یہ آپ اگر بلین روپے کی کاسٹ کریں گے تو بلین روپے سے آپ کاسٹ آف پروڈکشن کام نہیں کر سکتے، لیکن کم از کم اتنی تو کم کریں گے کہ اگر 1 بلین ہے تو کم از کم اس کا 15-20% تو کم کریں گے۔ تو یہی ہمارا اس وقت فوکس ہے کہ اپنی کمپیٹیٹیونیس کو دیکھیے۔ اگر آپ ایکسپورٹ مارکیٹ میں کمپیٹیٹیو نہیں ہوں گے تو لوکلی بھی کمپیٹیٹیو نہیں ہوں گے، کیونکہ امپورٹ سے جو قیمت آئے گی وہ کم ہوگی ایکسپورٹ کے مقابلے میں۔
آپ یہ کامیاب ہیں آگے؟
دیکھیے ابھی تک تو کامیاب ہم نے تو جیسے میں نے آپ سے بات کی کہ ہمارے جو پہلا کام تھا وہ یہ کہ ہم نے اس سچویشن کو جس طرح اینالائز کیا، تو ہم نے پہلا کام یہ کیا کہ جیسے ہی یہ مشکلات شروع ہوئی 2021 میں، اسی وقت سے ہم نے اپنی انوینٹری کم کر کے ڈیٹ کو پے آف کر دیا۔ تو آج آپ نے جو دیکھا کہ 22 بلین سے آج کچھ 4.7 بلین پر آپ کا ڈیٹ کھڑا ہوا ہے. اگر یہ 22 بلین پر ہوتا تو آپ آج 6 بلین روپے جو ہیں وہ انٹرسٹ میں پے کر رہے ہوتے تقریباً. تو یہ سارا پروفٹ جو ہم نے کمایا یہ سب انٹرسٹ کاسٹ میں نکل جاتا.
اب جو یہ گورنمنٹ جو اس پہ پرسنٹیج کم ہو رہا ہے لون لینے پہ، تو آپ کو جو ہے اس میں
دیکھیے ہمیں تو اس سے بڑا جو فائدہ ہے وہ یہ ہے کہ ملک میں سب سے بڑا فائدہ یہ ہے کہ ملک میں انڈسٹریل ایکٹیویٹی جو ہے وہ ریوائیو ہوگی. اور جب ریوائیو ہوگی تو ہماری جب والیوم پروڈکشن والیوم کم ہوتا ہے اور زیادہ آپ پروڈیوس کرتے ہیں تو آپ کی کاسٹ ابزارپشن بہتر ہو جاتی ہے. تو وہ ایک سب سے بڑا آپ کو ایڈوانٹیج ملتا ہے آپ کی کاسٹ آف پروڈکشن کو کم کرنے کا کہ اگر آپ زیادہ پروڈیوس کر سکیں. تو ہمیں امید یہ ہے کہ جس طریقے سے انٹرسٹ ریٹ کم ہوگا تو ملک میں انڈسٹریل ایکٹیویٹی بڑھے گی. اور جیسے یہ ایکٹیویٹی بڑھے گی تو ہمیں یہ موقع ملے گا اپنی کاسٹ آف پروڈکشن کم کرنے کا. اور جو ایشو آپ نے اٹھایا کمپیریٹیونیس کا، اس لحاظ سے ہم کمپیٹ کرنے میں زیادہ کمپیریٹیونیس ہماری بڑھ جائے گی. تو وہ اگر یہ ہوتا ہے اور مستقل ہوتا ہے اور ہم اس لو انفلیشن کو سسٹین کر سکتے ہیں over a longer period of time without increasing our imports too much، کیونکہ ہمارے پاس زیادہ گنجائش نہیں ہے. جیسے ہی ہم اپنی امپورٹس بڑھاتے ہیں ہمارا کرنٹ اکاؤنٹ ڈیفیسٹ ہاتھ سے نکل جاتا ہے. تو ان تمام چیزوں کو اگر ہم ٹھیک طریقے سے مینج کر کے چل سکے تو پھر آپ کو اس کا فائدہ نظر آئے گا.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. This is Mehroz Khan from Foundation Securities. I just want to ask the questions on a very broader level. First of all, sir, جیسے آپ نے mention کیا چائنا کی اگر ریکوری ہوتی ہے تو what kind of the pricing level the management is foreseeing in the upcoming future? Because obviously اس کا ایک impact بڑا significant ہوگا international steel prices پہ. We have seen that it has been, free fall from its peak, like you mentioned, $850 per ton, and now it's hovering under $500 per ton. So I really appreciate کہ جو management نے اپنی procurement efficiency کو fully utilize کیا ہے, explore کیا ہے, unfold کیا ہے, standing at 22 billion debt, and now, it's just trending with 4.5 billion. Even if I incorporate that the raw material prices have been halved and the volumes have been slowed down, so still the just-in-time inventory management, bear the fruits. So I congratulate on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll ask the second question.
میں پہلے آپ کے فرسٹ کوشچن کا جواب دوں. فرسٹ آف آل تھینک یو ویری مچ فار یور اپریسیشن. یہ ڈپینڈ کرتا ہے ٹو واٹ ایکسٹینٹ چائنا وڈ ریکور. وہ ریکوری ایز اٹ از تو نظر نہیں آتی کہ ہو سکتی ہے. The only way it can happen is if the Chinese government decides to introduce a stimulus plan, which I think they are in the process of developing one. Problem یہ ہے کہ whenever China has tried to do, I mean, if they succeed, this would be not the first plan that they have, or not the first stimulus they would have bought in. So اگر ہم یہ ایکسپیکٹ کرتے ہیں کہ Chinese government does offer a stimulus which does create a stimulant to the growth, question is how deep rooted it will be and can they, جو ان کا سوال تھا, sustain کر سکتے ہیں یا نہیں. پرابلم چائنا میں یہ ہے کہ جب آپ کی اکنامک ایکٹیویٹی نیچے آتی ہے, اینڈ اوور دا ایئرس چائنا ہیز اوور انویسٹڈ ان دا ریئل اسٹیٹ سیکٹر. جو اگر آپ چائنیز کمپنیز کا حال دیکھیں, ایور گرانڈ کا جو سارے $200 بلین کی ان کی بینکرپسیز ہوئی ہیں, تو ایسے میں اگر یہ ہم اسیوم کرتے ہیں کہ یہ انویسٹمنٹ فردر ہوتی ہے تو فردر جب ریوائول ہوتا ہے تو یو گو اگین انٹو کنسٹرکشن اینڈ اگین انٹو دیز سیگمنٹس. جب آپ ان سیگمنٹس میں جاتے ہیں اور انویسٹ کرتے ہیں تو what is the outcome? Can you sustain this? तो ये अकेले तो ये नहीं हो सकता. इसका मतलब ये है कि you have to offer incentives to people to buy more houses, more homes. But China is already grappling with a massive issue of ghost cities, where they've constructed apartment blocks after apartment blocks in almost all major cities. And they are all unoccupied, nobody lives there. So if you go and put in a stimulus, would it reach and would it result in stimulating growth? और इस पर बड़े मुख्तलिफ क्वेश्चन मार्क्स रहे हैं कि ये कर सकता है या नहीं कर सकता. एक और एस्पेक्ट इसमें ये है कि जो ज़्यादा वैल्यू एडेड सेगमेंट है वो है ऑटो सेक्टर. चाइना में जो इस वक्त सबसे स्ट्रॉन्गेस्ट सेक्टर है वो ऑटोमोबाइल सेक्टर है, और ख़ास तौर पर जो उनका एक दुनिया भर में एक कंपेटिटिव एडवांटेज बन गया वो है इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल्स. तो कंस्ट्रक्शन से नहीं हो सकता, इंडस्ट्री से हो सकता है, लेकिन वॉल्यूमेट्रिकली वो इतना नहीं है कि वो कंस्ट्रक्शन के शॉर्टफॉल को ऑफसेट कर सके. तो मैं ये समझता हूँ कि चाइना के लिए सिवाय प्रोडक्शन को कट करने के, रिड्यूस करने के और इनएफिशिएंट प्लांट्स को बंद करने के और कोई लॉन्ग टर्म सोल्यूशन नहीं है. प्रॉब्लम चाइना का ये है कि जब आप ये करते हैं तो ऑलरेडी जब इकोनॉमी 4% पे 4.8 पे ग्रो कर रही हो और अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट ग्रो कर रही हो, तो यू आर क्रिएटिंग फर्दर अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट इन चाइना. And they still follow a socialist model. So they will not, and that's why they've not been cutting production, because they've been kept on producing and piling up inventory. Now, piling up inventory, you can't produce more to get out of a problem. So at some stage, I think that will happen very soon, that China will have to cut production and issue a very well thought out stimulus to the economy. Only then you would see the Chinese demand recovering. अगर वो ये नहीं करेंगे तो I think they are increasingly finding all major markets are closing for them. So they can't export to US, they can't export beyond a certain quota to the European Union. India is now putting up import trade prices on Chinese products. तो जितनी major markets थी वो तो निकल गई. Indonesians and Malaysians are thinking about putting in duties on Chinese products. Vietnam is also doing the same. So अब चाइना के पास पाकिस्तान, बांग्लादेश और इनके पास इसके अलावा कोई खास मार्केट अगर यही इसी ट्रेजेक्टरी पे रहा तो नहीं रहेगा. So we expect a combination of both will happen. So they would trim production and take out the less efficient capacity out of the system and basically restructure the industry. So that is one thing that's going on. China में जो एक दूसरा aspect है वो ये समझते हैं कि अगर आप stimulus देंगे तो it will be short-lived. That's why they have not given a stimulus so far, which at least makes me think that they are still thinking through कि किस तरह stimulus दें कि ये sustain कर सके, जैसे आपने कहा. तो अब सिनेरियो ये है कि अगर prices stable तो होती हैं तो the prices will be more or less stable. हमें जो हर्ट करता है वो ज्यादा प्राइस या लो प्राइस नहीं करता, हमें वॉलेटिलिटी हर्ट करती है कि आज आपका रॉ मटेरियल $500 है और कल $430 हो जाता है. दैट हर्ट्स. बट इफ इट ग्रेजुअली कम्स डाउन, नेचुरल प्रोसेस से कम होता हुआ 500 से 450 पर आता है, इट डजंट हर्ट अस. सो आई थिंक मेरोज इट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट कि हमें low prices never hurts us. High prices don't hurt us. What hurts us, or what hurts everybody around the world, not just Pakistan or ISL, is the volatility in the prices. You jack up one day by $50. 2 weeks later, you are down by $80. That's what hurts. Volatility agar nahi rehti, and that volatility evens out, then I think the market would be fairly stable in terms of prices.
You mean to say that what they have been providing to the manufacturers back in 2021, which they have cut it, the 13% rebate?
नहीं, वो that was not a stimulus. वो ये था, वो इन्होंने ये किया था They had done that for one specific reason. So Chinese government had given an export rebate of 13%, which was given to incentivize Chinese to go move away from low valued steel to higher valued steel. So they wanted the industry to move towards value added steel. Like in any country of the world, when you give a rebate, it is bound to be misused. So what the Chinese started doing was they started adding in trace quantities of 0.0008% boron and started calling it as an alloy steel. So they defeated the purpose for which the export rebate was given. That's why the government withdrew the rebate, and with 13% they withdrew 11.5% of that thing. Now, having said that, steel business में 2% भी काफी ज़्यादा rebate है. So that was the reason. Now, the incentives that they have worked in the recent past is basically incentivizing first-time homeowners and now second-time homeowners for a second mortgage. When traditionally in China, what you do is if you had one mortgage, you can't get another mortgage. So now they're thinking about allowing you to have one mortgage plus another mortgage. Now, problem ये है कि जब आप ये काम करते हैं, you also run the risk of creating a bubble. Because if you lose one job, you lose two assets. And then you go in for foreclosures. And when you go in for foreclosures, there are so many of them that the whole sector collapses. तो ये बड़ा risky काम है इसको करना, unless it is well thought out and well executed with adequate controls built around. It's a very risky thing to do these measures.
Very well explained. I have 2-3 questions, but I'm combining it together because it's totally interlinked. What kind of export volumes growth, incremental growth, we can assume given the demand revival and even got the working on the export certification to PSA and this tariff imposition from the US and Canadian markets on China and India. India, I think it's on the pipeline right now. They haven't imposed yet. But what kind of incremental volumes that like this year, the ISL has posted a growth of 40%.
It's for us to determine how much we want to. But, US trade laws are different from rest of the world. So for rest of the world, things have to happen before they apply the rules. In US, if you can potentially be a threat, you go ahead and apply punitive or anti-dumping measures, while the event may not have occurred up to that point. So our strategy is that we will operate at a below threshold level so that we do not become a country of interest to the US regulators. To assess that, we will always operate at a reasonable level. What we would try and do is to improve margins, that you may get more value out of what you're exporting than you have traditionally done, without creating an exposure for you as far as the anti-dumping investigation is concerned. To us, that makes lot more sense than basically trying to sell a lot of products to gain more volume, and therefore selling at a lot less margins, and therefore exposing yourself to a detailed anti-dumping investigation. So that would be ideally our strategy, but let's see, how things unfold. As far as the volumes in exports are concerned, we have an ongoing process in the company where we identify and seek new markets. Some of these markets we do sustain. Some of these markets where we do a lot of legwork, we pull out because of the reasons that are beyond our control. One such market was Ukraine, where we entered after a lot of effort. And in 2021, while the shipment was on its way, the war started. And it became a hassle for us to bring the ship back into Pakistan. So that's one area. And then this, the Yemen thing started with the Houthis firing on the shipping lines and therefore stopping traffic through Suez Canal. And now you have to go through Africa to get back into Europe, which has made freight more expensive. But that's opened an opportunity for the Turks, because the Turks don't have to go through, the Suez Canal. So there are opportunities in the market, and there are opportunities that go away. But net, we would maintain a sustainable export business in the longer run. KSA remains now. KSA is a very interesting point, and while their plans are ambitious, but there is a rethink that's going on in KSA as well. So the line that was supposed to be 175 kilometers is now obviously going to be much smaller than 175. And therefore, with the oil prices coming down to the levels that they've come down, now whether the Saudis can sustain public expenditure at the current oil price levels is difficult to say. But we are taking steps to get into that market. So one step was, as you have seen here, is to be certified to be able to sell into Saudi market. Now I think the rest of the work is now under process. Once we get our first a couple of successes, we'd be a lot more confident about the longer term future in Saudi Arabia. But as things stand today, both in terms of the distance to Saudi Arabia from Pakistan, given the prices are commodity prices, we are well positioned. And given that we are certified now as well, I think we are in a fairly good position to capture, some portion of Saudi market.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right, so I'll just read out a few questions that we've got received online. The first one is in relation to the breakup of sales volume in terms of local and exports, and also in terms of the three products that we produce.
So I think in terms of the breakup of our products, in terms of volumes, we sold about 210,000 tons in domestic market and 68 in export markets. And in terms of the breakup of the products within galvanized, within our coated steel business, I think 7,000 tons went into our color coated part. The rest was all in domestic market. And in CR and cold rolled business, which was, I think the number was around 68,000 tons. I think it was about 68,000 tons.
The next question is that recent correction in the raw material prices, do we expect an inventory loss in first quarter?
So I think we don't expect an inventory loss because we are at a respectable margin as far as this is concerned. Obviously, we have made a pricing correction based in primarily from the fact that those are the prevailing or the landed cost of imports into the country. So we try ourselves to be at par with them. But at this point in time, we don't believe that there would be an inventory loss.
A couple of questions on our investment in CECL in relation to the Recodec project, if you could give a little update. Yeah, this is in terms of the project size, the duration of the project, and what the future holds.
So I think just in terms of the CECL piece, so CECL is a joint venture between our group and the three listed companies, which is us, Pakistan Cables, and International Industries. Each one of them have about the same holding of 17%. So the project is about designing, constructing a accommodation block at Recodec, which is the copper mining area within Balochistan province. So this is the first phase of the project. We believe that as we establish a foothold in the in the project, it will open up more opportunities for the second phase as well for us. Also, the fact that with this entry, all three companies would be able to sell their products into this project. So that's again a positive for the group. Now, coming up to the size of of what this would be worth, I think it will be anywhere from it's a significant few $1 million worth of return on this project. But obviously, it's still very early days for the project.
The next question is in relation to the electricity used for conversion from raw material to CRC and other products.
In what sense?
In terms of the cost of in the
So I think it's very important that we will potentially have three sources of energy. One is the gas that we use to produce power, which is our primary source of energy. That's followed by what we can import from KE. And the third source of energy, which would be up and running by November this year, is the solar component of it. So all three have a different mix. The KE rates are well published and well established at 57 rupees a unit. Our own energy is that we generate through KE is much cheaper, with gas with much cheaper. And it is much cheaper because it's a cogeneration facility. So we recover heat that comes out of our engines to produce steam and the air conditioning and chilling requirements for the whole complex and the whole facility. So when you add the factor, and plus it gives us enough to generate some more electricity using a steam turbine. So as a result, the overall efficiency of our power generation goes up to upwards of 68%. Now, as a consequence, our energy cost when we use gas is about 36 rupees or 37 rupees a unit. So it is by far the cheapest source of energy we have now. But it will change very quickly once the solar comes online. So our strategy would be to first maximize the entire solar production. That will be followed by gas. And then if we need any further electricity, we would buy from KE.
The next question is related to order outlook for two-wheelers and three-wheeler segment.
So the two-wheeler segment, which includes the three-wheeler segment, I think it's fairly robust. It's the only sector that has recovered to almost 85 or 90% of its volume if you compare it with the pre-crisis level. So it's almost there in terms of where it was. So that I think in terms of demand, we expect it to be fairly robust. This year it's been robust also from the fact that the agricultural crop was very strong and positive. And I think it will remain further and maybe it will also see growth if the crops remain strong this year as well.
The next question is in relation to the impact on profitability of normal taxation on exports.
So that's the interesting one. One aspect of our profit being lower, we could have actually made 4 billion rupees this year. The reason why we couldn't do it was that we had to take a hit of about 330 million on account of deferred taxation. Because this year, the exports are now taxed at the normal tax level. So the way you do taxation is the difference between the normal tax regime and the export tax regime. The differential is carried as a deferred tax asset. And because in future there was no deferred tax because exports were going to be taxed at the normal tax rate. So that deferred liability had to be had to be carried in the books for this year. So we had to take a charge of 330 million rupees on taxation to cover for that. So what could have been, a profit of about 4 billion rupees was reduced by 330 million rupees on account of this issue. And if you look at the balance sheet where the deferred tax is liability is there on the equity side, you see actually a reduction in the deferred tax asset. So I think going forwards, as the tax rate has come down on exports, it's very important to know that today there is no real incentive between exports and if you're trying to sell domestically. Export refinance, if you recall, which used to be at 3%, is now 3% lower than the policy rate. So if the policy rate today is 17.5%, then you probably get at 14.5%. So there is no real benefit today when you compare it with as far as the taxation or any benefit is concerned when it comes to exports. Now, where exports play a huge role for us is they become important when you're trying to look at your product and brand identification and across various geographies. It also helps to improve your quality because then you're competing with everybody else in the world. So it helps you to lift the bar and perform well. And the third more important thing is that it helps you to absorb your fixed cost more effectively than you otherwise would without export volumes. All those inherent. Now, there's one more advantage that is no longer valid, but during the real crisis times when they were not opening any LCs, we were able to establish LCs primarily on the basis of the export business. So if we had no export business, we would not have been able to continue operations at that time.
A few questions from the participants. Firstly is Mr. Mukeet Naeem.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर आवाज आ रही है
Mukeet sir, थोड़ी वॉइस आपकी कम आ रही है.
जी अब बेहतर है
Yes.
अच्छा सर एक सवाल मेरा ये एक्सपोर्ट्स रिलेटेड है जैसे कि पूरी ब्रीफिंग में हमने एक्सपोर्ट्स के वॉल्यूम्स को काफ़ी डिस्कस किया एक्सपोर्ट्स के पोटेंशियल को डिस्कस किया आई जस्ट वांटेड टू नो कि हम जितनी एक्सपोर्ट्स कर रहे हैं क्या हम लोग नेट लेवल पे उससे कोई प्रॉफिट्स भी बना रहे हैं या हम लॉस कर रहे हैं मेरा सवाल इसलिए है मैं आपको 2-3 नंबर्स बताता हूँ एक्सपोर्ट्स अगर मैं देखता हूँ आपकी तो आपकी 16.7 बिलियन की एक्सपोर्ट्स थी इन FY24 जो कि 4 बिलियन इंक्रीज है फ्रॉम लास्ट ईयर इस पे अगर मैं ग्रॉस मार्जिन 10% या 11.5% लगाता हूँ तो 450 मिलियन आपने ग्रॉस पे कमाया फ्रेट चार्जेस में देखता हूँ तो वो 1 बिलियन से आपके इंक्रीज है यानी कि 600 मिलियन से 1.6 बिलियन तो एडिशनल आप कह रहे हैं कि एक्सपोर्ट्स हमने किए हैं और इससे काफ़ी यूटिलाइजेशन बेहतर हुई है बट क्या नेट लेवल पे वो प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी ऐड कर पा रही है या नहीं कर पा रही अच्छा मेरा दूसरा सवाल भी है मैं साथ साथ कंबाइन कर लेता हूँ जो आप लोगों के लॉसेज हैं फ्रॉम पावर जनरेशन वो लास्ट ईयर 28 मिलियन थे इस साल 226 मिलियन रुपीस के हैं ऑलमोस्ट 8 टाइम्स का इंक्रीज है तो जो इनकम फ्रॉम पावर जनरेशन या सॉरी लॉसेस फ्रॉम पावर जनरेशन है उसमें इतने ज़्यादा लॉसेस क्यों हैं
तो मैं आपके पहले सेकंड क्वेश्चन से पहले स्टार्ट करता हूँ देखिए हमारी जो स्कीम है द वे वी डू वी प्रोड्यूस एंड सेल पावर is that we have the arrangement is such that we will when we generate our process is such that when cold rolling process is taking place your power consumption peaks off and as you are completing the process the power reduces and that's the time when you basically put the power into mains to KE. And it has worked well for us historically, right up to a point where a change has happened in the last couple of years. And the change is that during winters and now even in summers, the charge SSGC has started making is on the basis of 80-20. So 80% of, in the summers, 80% of the power is on the basis of normal gas, and 20% is based on LNG. And in winters, it changes even further. It goes 60% on the old policy, which is the normal gas, and 40% on RLNG basis. Now, when you add RLNG and LNG both into the mix, it becomes the gas becomes expensive. Now, KE's view on this is that the contract that we have with them is not on RLNG basis. So obviously, they say they are not prepared to pay you that extra for RLNG. Now, what we have managed to achieve through our initiatives is to basically reduce our export of electricity to KE, and we've reduced it considerably now. And we are in the process of putting in an energy management solution, which will come into force in the coming few months, where during these kind of peaks, we will store energy and use it when we need energy without having to export this energy to KE, therefore technically eliminating this problem that you have alluded to. So that's one part of the question that you're right, because the LNG component, when it gets to 60-40 or 80-20, KE is not prepared to buy electricity at that rate. And when they are not able to buy, and the operation is such that when it happens, you can't stop the flow of molecules. So we have now reduced this down to 2 to 3%. And I don't think we can go technically lower than that. And when we do sell to KE, we cannot charge them the LNG rates. To address this problem, we are in the process of analyzing a solution which will store this energy while we are in the peak, and use the energy when we need it in the evenings. So we hope that by doing so, we will eliminate this problem altogether in the coming months. Now going back to your profit problem, your question about export profitability. Now, export profitability, as you said, and I had just articulated the fact that one of the issues has been that due to the orders that we had already taken or were in process as a result of the Suez Canal being closed, we had to take a longer route to get to the destinations which we had committed. Now, the other problem is that, once you are in export business, you can't move in and out of the markets as you would like to. So you can't create space for your competitors when the steel prices are low, and give your space to your competitors, and try and re-enter the market when you think the prices are right, and you can re-enter. Because once you've given up space to a competitor, you've lost it, and the competitor and your customer would feel that, when you are a supplier of good times, you only supply when prices are good. It's an unsustainable approach to work business. So there are times when the year before, your margins on exports were actually better off than your domestic margins. And then there are times when your export margins lag behind your domestic margins. So this year, on account of various factors, these margins were lower than what you would have anticipated. So I think with and the whole discussion we had around steel pricing, so as the prices stabilize, the export margins will only improve from here. So I hope that answers your question.
ओके सर, मैं आपका रैशनल तो समझ गया एक्सपोर्ट्स का, बट इट आल्सो कंक्लूड्स के जो एक्सपोर्ट या एडिशनल एक्सपोर्ट ड्यूरिंग द ईयर हुई, उस पे कोई प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी जनरेट नहीं हुई, लॉसेज हुए हैं. इज दैट आई एम सेइंग इज करेक्ट?
I think I think it's on a few orders, yes, it would be true. And some
Overall.
orders it would not be true.
Just asking overall basis पे.
हाँ, और overall तो फिर
One last question that we have over here is in relation to the HRC project. Are we still committed towards that, or is that on a back burner?
फिलहाल तो it's all on hold right now. Given the current situation, given the current size of the market, it's on hold right now. I think unless the situation improves and comes to a point, um, where it makes sense for us to do. Until that point, it's on a hold.
Thank you.
Any more questions? So I think since there are no further questions, I'd like to thank everybody for participation and some very incisive questions. I hope we've been able to give you an insight to our business, its challenges, its opportunities, some of the things that we've done to try and mitigate, the risks that we carry. And as usual, some of you have given me fantastic thoughts and ideas. And if you do have a thought and idea, please do share with me. So thank you all for your participation today. Thanks.